Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimist, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. I'm your co-host, Seth Boyd.
I am Megan Tierney.
And folks, we have another treat for you in a fairly recent movie, an Oscar
Mhm.
contender, Taika Waititi's Jojo Rabbit. And this
Yes.
is another of the recently increasingly growing list of movies that Megan had to remind me I really need to watch. So while I did love it, and Megan, you were the reason I saw this. I think this was in your
Oh,
maybe this was in your top from 2021 or 2022
it was.
top
It
movies you
was.
watched.
It
Yeah.
was.
Okay, so you were
hmm
also late to it. I'm going to take some solace in that.
No, no, I was. How true of me, but also how embarrassing. Because damn, if I wanted to see this movie in theaters, I like having rewatched it now.
Yes, absolutely. Well, before we dive into the movie and why we're talking about it, I think one thing we want to talk about is just Taika Waititi. And
hmm
Megan, do you recall when you first became aware of him as a filmmaker, as a creative? He's
Well,
kind of everywhere now,
it's
which is
true.
great.
I mean,
Yeah.
as a filmmaker, I think I did go into this movie. Uh, First of all, knowing very little about him, but I did know that he directed a Thor movie and
Okay.
kind of, maybe a couple actually, and kind of left it at that, or that's almost all I knew. I didn't know anything about also his like Maori background. He's from New
Mm,
Zealand, so I didn't know anything about that necessarily. And this was his first, I think, yeah, this was his first film that I watched.
okay.
And associated his name with, in other words. And I'll say, like, after watching it, became increasingly like wanting to see more and more of what this guy had to offer because of
Okay.
his directorial style. So,
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that because I think
mhm.
there's a terrible thing that happens when somebody as great as Taika Waititi is seen more, that people start to complain that he's overexposed. I'm certainly not sick of the man, um,
Yeah,
especially like it's not like we have a lot of other Maori Jewish heritage filmmakers that are in the
yes,
public eye often.
right.
So I think
hmm
the other one, Maori at least, is his frequent collaborator, Jermaine Clementine of Flight of the Concords,
Okay,
which Flight of the Concords is how I became aware of it. It's just kind of comedy nerd. There was the band and the TV show, which Taika directed several episodes of,
yes,
and then he did the movie What We Do in the Shadows with Jermaine. They co-directed it, the great vampire comedy mockumentary, and now that's a show that he's also involved in. And we'll talk more about this later. But yeah, currently has three shows that he's a creative on the air right now. Has directed two Marvel
right.
movies. Is an Oscar winner. He won an Oscar for best adapted screenplay for this movie.
Yes,
But I think is still very much an indie filmmaker at heart.
I think
So
so. I was trying to remember because this, I wanted to say this was his debut film, but he had created a like very small budget film. I don't know if it was actually a full length feature,
right.
but I believe it was like set in New Zealand about his origins, if you will, like his growing up and stuff. So, semi. Like I think that was the first thing he did.
Yeah, he's done I think 4 or 5 films by now. Let me double check. But this was certainly
Oh,
like a larger. He was nominated for an Oscar for his short film Two Cars One Night. He's done 7 movies right now with another one set to come out next year. But this was certainly the this is I think is very interesting because as we mentioned, he did Thor Ragnarok, which is
right.
maybe still my favorite Marvel movie because it was just such a fresh breath of fresh air compared to everything else.
hmm
Confession, though, I haven't seen his other Thor movie.
Right.
I've heard it's not up to par, but it was really interesting that the first thing he did after massive, biggest budget he's ever worked with to that point, much more exposure, doing a
hmm
massive over $100 million budget, is this very odd comedy
Right.
taking down Nazis,
hmm
which was still a daring thing to do, unfortunately.
hmm
So
Yes.
this was a very strange, and for people who don't know, it's not only a comedy about Nazis, he also plays a fictionalized comedic version of Hitler. Is a
Right.
very, very strange version of it that if you just see a poster, you might get the wrong idea or think what this movie's about. Kind of
I
a Mel Brooks type of energy to it.
That's a great way to put it. I've heard a lot of interesting commentary about this movie of people
Mm,
who first of all hadn't watched it but were they were offended by it. So there was like a little controversy behind this movie that
yeah.
didn't just like that doesn't make me want to watch it, but I was intrigued as to the plot of it all, and after seeing the trailers and everything, that it had been on my watch list for like a while,
Sure.
in other words, and I was like, well, I don't see, not that I didn't see the controversy, but I needed to see for myself. In other words,
Sure.
if
Sure.
like, and I'm really glad I did, because as I harped on in our like recap episode, you guys can go back and watch that, folks. But I was really blown away by this movie, and I am glad I didn't listen to those little like speckles of commentary that I was
Right.
hearing, because what a what a breath of fresh air for me.
Right. No, I fully agree, and I think that's Megan, you and I are not comedy experts. There's plenty of people who can do that. There's listen to what the Thuckle Park Marion if you really want to take on comedy. But I think this is such a great example of a controversial comedy that you can, like you say,
Yes.
clearly see the controversial that is also, to me, not offensive. So it's like the butt of the joke is Nazis.
Correct.
There's if you're gonna punch down anybody,
Yeah.
Nazis is a pretty good target. So
Mm-hmm.
certainly controversial, but not offensive. It's not
Yes.
PC in that sense, but
Right.
I have no problem with it. And again, Taika Waititi is a Jewish person, so
That's right.
who is, I think, anyone who wants to say you can't make this movie, I don't think you can tell that to a Jewish person. So,
Right.
um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but yeah, this is a very outlandish movie that I think also has some serious weight to it and deals with
It
it
does.
appropriately. I think that's all stuff to know maybe before the movie if you haven't seen it, because it handles it better than you might have expected if you were worried about it.
True.
But maybe some of the
Had
theories,
you heard about that set?
I heard the controversy. I mean, I think especially whenever something is taken something this controversial, there's a um I consider myself socialist, not liberal. I think there might be a group of
Yes.
PC liberals who are concerned that you can't say this. And I think you have
Mm-hmm.
a group of actual Nazis who were offended because
Yeah.
that's the other weird thing that's I don't even know exactly when this movie came out, how bad it was, but certainly more recently, just because time is a blur of COVID, more recently you do have people more openly being a Nazi, marching,
Yes.
literally praising Hitler.
Oh, I think it
Um,
was almost at the height, because this was 2019
that
when
is
it came
2019.
out.
You're right.
And
Yes.
but Taika, I had watched some behind the scenes things, and this had been in the works for a long time, and
Ye-
also like I will say even in the works pre like 2016 election and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Like yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a benchmark for me.
Yeah. But no, I think that's absolutely right. So I think what are, you mentioned some controversies you've heard, Megan. Do you mind expanding on if any particular ones that you found were really unfounded?
Well, I mean, I like that you said like the more PC liberal ones, people being offended or looking at this movie outwardly without having seen
Right.
it, and on the fence of being offended. And I can kind of see if they hadn't seen the movie, because I think it is marketed as a comedy. Like that's what
Right.
I got from it. But I totally agree with you. Like, of course, having watched it, I think that it's actually even on the lighter side. Like, there's less comedy in it,
Hmm.
or I should say, like there is as much like brevity and like heart in the movie as comedy. So it's not.
Right.
I don't think it's a full on parody. I think that it's a very, I don't know, a very like formulaic mix almost, which is the reason that it stood out to me so much, because I didn't know how to do that, like that dance of if that's appropriate or not of this
Yeah.
topic. And I was really, really impressed that they did. Basically, I felt that it like fully succeeded. So that's kind of why I hold it so highly also.
Glad to hear you say that. I think that's true. I think from other Taika Waititi movies, even when they're not dealing with something this serious, but still serious topics, they have an emotional weight to them that you would not expect, because so many of the jokes are so silly. They are
Right.
great prop comedies or puns or you know stupid. Again, to go back to Mel Brooks, really wacky jokes.
Yeah.
But then there's
Mm-hmm.
something very serious happening as well, and I think the magic of his movies is both those knobs are pushed up to 11. They're both
Yeah.
firing on all cylinders. It's not 80% comedy, 20% emotional heft.
That's. Mm-hmm.
It's everything all the time.
Oh,
Well,
that's a great
okay,
way to put it.
we've given the setup for this
I
a
know.
little bit, so
We said
Megan,
how
dive
we feel
in.
about it.
Yeah.
Sure. So what this movie is actually about.
Mhm.
This movie is about a little boy, a young 10-year-old boy, Jojo, living in Nazi Germany. And he is a Nazi himself. He's growing up in the regime, is very pro Germany. And his world is kind of being tested throughout the movie. His ideology, I would say, is being tested throughout the movie. One is the war like progresses kind of towards the end for Germany, but also just in his growing up, I would say, and just in his experiences, because he comes to find out that his mother has been hiding or safekeeping a young Jewish girl in their house to protect her from what's going on outside, basically. And Jojo happens upon her, and the rest of the movie is basically built around his relationship with her and what that does to his ideologies of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, it's and I think that's an aspect. I actually, before I say this, Megan, knowing the premise, knowing the trailer, etc., was there a plot detail that was surprising to you,
Um,
or anything in particular that surprised you about the movie?
well, I mean, I found it surprising about. I think I didn't know the full extent of the parody aspect, but
Okay,
that they were parodying so much like
right.
Nazism was
Hmm.
I mean, you can get that from the trailer too, but like it's done very well. It's done very, I thought, cleverly,
Yeah,
and really dances the line like almost perfectly. That's the biggest thing that like I was kind of surprised by
yeah, absolutely.
from, yeah, from the trailer.
And maybe I missed this in the trailer, but I was surprised at how it was so close to the end of the war,
Uh-huh.
and you
Hmm.
start to see more of that like fairly quickly in the movie. You know that Germany's losing, and that a lot of Nazis know Germany's losing, which is a very interesting time to see that, because part of his occasion there's just kind of moments of him losing faith or trying to really be this outspoken rah rah boy for the Fuhrer, while there's adults being depressed about the way the war is going, and he's
Yeah.
confused by that.
Yep. Well, adults, even his own mother, like that becomes
Yeah,
a big contention for Jojo throughout the film, is that she is very much like a pacifist in this war and doesn't is done basically doesn't want
yeah,
to
and
deal with
is
it anymore.
as far as he's concerned a traitor, is
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and his mother's played by Scarlett Johansson,
Hmm.
who I always forget is really good in movies. Not that I hear that
She
often, but I thought
she
she was
did
great in this.
fantastic. She
Yeah,
did fantastic.
a lot of other comedy people in here. Rebel Wilson is in there. Stephen
Yeah,
Merchant,
it's quite a
Sam
comedic
Rockwell's briefly in
cast.
it. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
and you have people who are known for broad, schlocky. Not that it's
Hmm.
bad comedy like Rebel Wilson, as a Nazi. So I liked that too. That
Yeah.
you didn't have Ray Fiennes. You didn't
Yeah,
have
that's true.
not to knock these people. You didn't have a distinguished Shakespearean actor really bring this
Mm,
level of dignity to the Nazis. No, you had them being very dumb.
straight up.
And yeah, the dumbest of them all is his idealized version of Hitler. Is
That's
this,
right.
which I remember
Yeah.
Taika Waititi described it as the Fonz from Happy Days as Hitler.
Hmm. There was something he said, like he felt compelled to play the character. He was a little like reserved at first. He didn't know
Right.
obviously if he wanted to play Hitler, but he thought what better of a fu to him than like a Jew Maori man like playing Hitler and just being an absolute dick about
Yeah.
it. That part really was good
I love.
stuff.
Yeah, I thought that was. I think that's great. I think that's how he should be depicted. um,
Hmm. There was a
but
lot of really great moments in it, and they use I do like that they use the comedy of like the insane and of course hurtful, but like
right,
insane Nazi propaganda that goes on
right,
about Jewish people and or just about Hitler himself. That is always the butt of the joke, and that is always the ridiculed aspect. Hopefully, that people
yes,
take it that way. I think that's kind of the goal. It's not like overtly in your face, but they
right,
portray it that way in the movie, and hopefully people will take it that way. And then also that it's through very much the mind of a child, like this young boy just growing up, and
right.
I think it shows one how just fallible the logic is of
Yeah,
like Nazism and propaganda in general, but also just how do you explain the atrocities of war or how do you
Right.
just comprehend the atrocities of war in this mind of like a sweet child? Also, the child actor,
Yes.
I'm gonna blank on his name, but
Roman
amazing.
Griffin Davis.
Roman Griffith, yes, so good in this. Like carries it. The movie's about him. He's in like almost every scene.
Yeah.
He is fantastic and just so lovable.
Yeah, there's a handful of movies where with child leads that just really get me.
Right?
And I think it's when it's a drama comedy, it's a more serious than movie than just a family movie. You
Yeah.
know, it gets me a lot more than I expect. Like, and one of those other movies is a Taika Waititi movie I'll mention later.
Oh yes.
But yeah, the kid is fantastic in this. One of I think we should maybe mention plot wise is he's kind of also having this huge emotional crisis because
Right.
he basically really fucks up at Nazi summer camp. He
That's
really
true.
does he blow off his hand or he really he's running with a grenade and has an
Yes.
accident and now
A
has a
grenade goes off near him and kind
okay
of scars him, his face and
yeah so
side
he
of his
has
body.
horrible scars on his face, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is disfigured and is obviously upset about that, but is more upset about not being able to be a good Nazi for the Fuhrer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of I think partially him being around more at home is how he ends up running into is Elsa, the one who's been hidden,
Elsa. Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting about like that the idea of being, you know, 12 and you're not growing up to be your father or whatever, you're not growing up to be
Uh-huh.
the man you want to be, especially when you're that small and you really have this life planned out. I love
That's true.
that's a normal thing, but that just being inverted to something so depressing that he really wants to be a good German soldier and kill Jews.
It's true.
Is
Mm-hmm.
all he wants to do.
It shows the depth of his indoctrination at this point
Yeah.
and like just willingness or that he's thinking mostly about Hitler is very fun or like and being a soldier at the time is very funny.
Yeah.
But also tragic, you know, you see like how it could happen for these little boys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the summer camp is actually very interesting too because like we're saying, like it is a funny take on things, but there's a lot of harmful and
Yeah.
and hurtful things going on, of course, and they show it too, and that is very much not a joke. Like they're very cruel at the summer camp.
Yeah.
If they're not cruel, I would say that the adults are like apathetic because they're kind of they also show like the apathy of war and how like fucked up you get towards the end.
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell's character kind of embodies that a lot, and I thought it was really well done. But in the summer camp, like they're telling Jojo to kill. Actually, where he gets kind of the film gets its namesake is that they tell Jojo to kill a rabbit.
Right.
Just to make sure that he's down with killing, and he can't do it. He lets it go away, and
Yeah.
everybody makes fun of him for it, and that becomes his teasing namesake, and also gives the name. Yeah, it gives the name of the film. So I don't know. There's it sets you up to obviously see like potentially what this kid's gonna do like towards the end, but it was it is like not taken lightly in the film that there were of course atrocities going on, and you see even in his hometown there's hangings in the street going on, like they do show all that, and the people are aware around it too. Like his mom tells him to like he as a child doesn't want to see the hangings and all the atrocities going on, but his mom says no, look at this is a like she forces his head up to look to say like this is a direct result of the war. Like she wants to make it very clear. So I think that seeing that juxtaposition too in him is and that struggle in him is important throughout the whole movie, like as he goes through this journey.
And do I remember correctly that the father died in the war?
So the father is away, and the mother keeps saying like he's coming back, he's fighting in Italy right now, but it's likely that he is either dead or he just kind of fled elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah. Yikes.
Mm-hmm.
I
know.
You know, usually folks were kind of assuming you're watch this movie or not going to watch this movie, you're just going to listen to a description, so spoilers are coming up, but because so much of the movie is comedic how horrible Jojo is because he's this indoctrinated little kid who had like he does a drawing about like a field guide to identifying Jews, and it's all horrible racist stereotypes, and he proudly presents just Sam Rockwell's Nazi commander character, who has an odd kind of like thank you, I guess, reaction. He has kind of encouraged him to do art. We should mention Sam Rockwell's character and Alfie Allen are gay, which is, and that ends up being a problem for them later, of course.
Right.
They were also sent to camps. But you get a lot of him being horrible by just spouting what he's heard. But then towards the end of the movie, when the war is basically over,
right,
he kind of lies. I mean, not kind of, he does lie to Elsa, the Jewish woman who's hiding there for a while, because that's his mom is dead. That's the only person he knows really right now, and he doesn't want her to go. And he just I think does something that is understandable for a shitty little kid, but is also really horrible. It lets her think, yeah, you're gonna probably die. You're clearly your family's dead.
yes,
We're winning the war. It's a movie too that really makes you examine the morality of this little kid. That this is a choice he makes. This is not him just parroting something. This is a kid who want to kill the rabbit, who's also still keeping a woman hostage.
yeah,
Ultimately, it's okay. Ultimately, they're released. They kind of, I don't want to say just get over it, but she's understanding of what's going on, and the ending is just them dancing madly, which I thought was very beautiful. And dancing to David Bowie's German version of Heroes, which is very appropriate.
There's a lot of American to German song. There's a Beatles Beatles interpretation. Yep.
Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting that you're not just given the out of, oh, he's just a kid spouting stuff. Like, he does actually make a really horrible decision. And you're watching that it's kind of the third act.
Yeah, definitely. Something else that was striking to me about the movie is the overall aesthetic of it. I don't know if you had ever seen, Seth, a like World War II movie filmed in brilliant color this way, but I certainly had not.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And not to like, because I don't want to like, aesthetic is obviously not the most important like thing going on in a World War II movie, and certainly not in this one. But it was very interesting to me because I had seen again like previously that it was talked about that the like German architecture at the time, or German German textiles were extremely like brilliant in color. So they went to great lengths to make it as accurate as possible. And you just don't see, like, when you think about World War II movies, it feels kind of a very long time ago, far, far away kind of place, because it's all in black and white, very dystopian, and just very, that vintage, older looking feel. And this is literally imbued with life almost. Like, it's very, very colorful. I loved it personally. Like, it's just, it is very beautiful, but it also, I think it just is interesting to me because it colors everything in a very different light, like literally and almost figuratively, because it brings something else to the surface when we see something like that, and knowing that it's it also makes it like feel a little more timely, which is kind of an important lesson to be reminded of and stuff. This wasn't that long ago at all. So I loved it. The style was very, very beautiful. And what an interesting, I'm glad to see it almost. I'm glad to see that interesting lens. And not that it was it was accurate, I know, like historically accurate, but I mean, it's not like, footage or anything from the time, but I thought it did
that's
a great job.
Point. I think the movie does look beautiful. Like you said, it's very vibrant colors, and we're certainly primarily thinking black and white. We're primarily thinking battlefields, right? For the trenches for World War II movies. So I think this movie gives you really great, and credit where credit's due. Inglourious Basterds, fairly recent as well, also has, shot very modernly, and you have a little bit of day-to-day life in like Nazi occupied Paris. But I think it's very interesting to see, again, if really grounding this is like not everyone was at the battlefield, but just like who's running the bakery in Berlin, and just the day-to-day life for people who are living in a country that's occupied themselves, that is now hostage to their own country. And I'm very partial to a lot of German culture aside from Nazism. Like a lot of the poets, I like a lot of the music. It's a very beautiful country. And so I think that's also a thing that can get lost in the shuffle often of an American movie is Germany's a beautiful place with a very rich
Yes.
history and culture, and this movie kind of celebrates what is aside from that a little bit too.
Right.
About like it is very sad that obviously so many places were bombed or destroyed,
Yeah.
and one of those places is Germany,
Right.
and I
I
think
was
that
gonna
often
the
gets ignored.
and the movie shows it too, because there's
Right.
an epic battle by the end
Yes.
of it, a very, very tragic battle by the end of it. The scenery
Yeah.
was pretty amazing actually to
It
see
was.
that
Yeah.
in color as well, because it looked very accurate. Like it certainly was a set. I don't think it was a green screen or anything like that.
Right. Right.
But even if it was, it was pretty hard to see like these explosions going on and little Jojo kind of running through that and just being very like literally in the thick of it.
Right.
That was
And of
powerful
course,
too.
living what he thought was going to be his dream, but it's his
Right.
nightmare.
Oh,
What
that's a
he
good point.
was so looking forward to of having a chance to kill some Americans, because
Yeah.
they're there, and you have the
Yeah.
great. To me, I thought unexpected moment because you kind of see Sam Rockwell's a little bit. I think he's often drunk, if I'm remembering correctly. He's kind of
Yeah.
distraught, isn't really loving his position, and ultimately sacrifices himself, draws attention to American soldiers, and gets himself shot and lets Jojo
Right.
run away.
Hmm.
So that was, you know, again going back to the emotional weight. Wasn't expecting a sacrifice here
Right.
in
Right.
the comedy Hitler movie, but
I know. Pretty well
yeah,
done, like in my eyes.
absolutely.
A lot of like just subtlety going on, I guess.
Hmm.
Because even in that scene, like I feel like he pushes him and he was just comforting him. Like Jojo was
Right,
so scared after all of this like stuff going on. He lost his mom already.
right,
And the way he pushes him away and like treats him as if he were like a Nazi to a Jew. And I think
right,
Jojo
right,
gets taken aback by that.
right.
So he's seeing like his previous thinking in action or like to
Hmm.
him almost. So that was
Right.
nice that he got to experience that like too himself.
That's true, absolutely. And I think we should talk a little bit about one of the criticisms I saw of this movie that I think is really weird is the assumption that some of this stuff isn't real. That some
Right.
of the
Oh.
because there was such a propaganda aspect of Nazism. There were the posters everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and something that I learned fairly recently. It was the same tactic that a good rock manager has for booking a band to get them big is to put them in a space that's too small,
Mm-hmm.
so it looks really crowded. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
something the Beatles managers would do, like knowing that 300 people are going to go to this venue, so we put a venue for 200 people. And now, like, well, what's going on there? Everyone wants to get in, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
notices it. Nazis would do that with Hitler gatherings. Like that's a thing they would do
Wow.
as well. You'd have the posters or use these basic tactics to draw a crowd. So
Yep.
having the kind of, like you said, it's the Beatles singing in German of "I want to hold your hand" is drawing attention to that, I think, and you do have this kind of Beatlemania Nazism, but that's what happened. That was the plan, and to
They
bring
show
it back
footage
to
as well.
exactly to bring it back to real world again, like that's kind of what we see of Trump. um,
Yes.
the bizarre worship of not just Trump as a political person, which is horrible in itself, but just the paintings of Trump hugging Jesus and just
Yeah.
Trump, you know, ascending the heavens and him as this supernatural figure, like ripped Trump and all these things that are bizarre and so disturbing to me, just
Yeah.
on its own, but especially when you think about what it's comes out of, which is similar drawings and assumptions about Hitler and other horrible world leaders. It's nothing new.
Well, I
So,
was gonna say even a more modern equivalent is like North Korean propaganda
mm,
is the same
sure,
with like that's what I think when I see the weird
right,
ass Trump propaganda too. I'm
yeah,
like,
absolutely,
and I think how can people not see the comparison or like how can people not see
yeah,
that that it is so similar like that may be
right.
the strangest part of it all.
And I think if you are surrounded by like-minded people, like it's one of the reasons I think Facebook is so horrible now, not to and any other corner of the internet. If you're surrounded by people who just think the one thing, if you're only following those pages, you think that's what everyone thinks,
That's
and you
true.
think
Hmm.
it's very easy to other anybody who doesn't also envision Donald Trump playing ball with Jesus or whatever. um,
That's right.
so, and obviously that's what's happened in this movie. If you're
I was gonna
surrounded, if you're a Nazi surrounded by Nazis, it's very hard to find the other people if you're not
right.
that.
It's a pretty
So,
earnest way to show indoctrination, like almost, or
absolutely.
just cult mentality as well.
Mhm.
And I love that Jojo is turned on his head because he confronts his so-called enemy in Elsa,
Right.
like in this girl. And actually the movie's very much to me also a love story, like literally,
Yeah.
to not give too much away, but Jojo does experience like having feelings for Elsa and
Yeah.
having a schoolboy crush on like his
Hmm.
literal enemy. And so I think that becomes a big part of it. And
Yeah.
again, like humanizes his experience as this is just a 10-year-old kid, like
Right.
who has built up a hate wall around him or like a hatred, but once tenements from his mother taught him about love come into his life, it does permeate it, and it it doesn't stand, it doesn't withhold his previous like hateful rhetoric, like it just doesn't last. And I
Right.
love that.
And
I also really quick love that Elsa, she's playing into his fears of Jewish
mhm.
people, but also disproves him at every point, or like one ups him with it at every point. Like she's also just physically bigger than him. She's like in her late teenage years, and he's a 10 or so. Um, and she's just one upping him like right and left, and he's he's taken for like days because of it, and
Yeah.
not only because she's like that she is Jewish, like is a part of it too. So you see his mind unravel basically by this girl that turns his ideas on his head.
Right. There's like the moment where he's proudly saying, "I am strong because I'm Aaron, you're an inferior race," and then she just picks him up, and
Yeah, yeah.
Aaron's like, "No,
She
you're not
like
strong."
chokeholds him.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
"I am much stronger than you. I could kill you."
Yes,
And
and he's very frightened by like
yeah,
physically frightened by
it is
her.
like you said. It's that kind of like you should be scared of me, but also
Right.
like this, all these other things are bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's also going back to the emotional weight of this. So many of the scenes of Scarlett Johansson are her trying as hard as she can while remaining safe to encourage Jojo to not be a Nazi,
Yeah.
to, like you said, embrace love, and has the very valid concern that her son will report her. Again, spoiler: she dies before she gets to see her son become a good person.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Disregard Nazism and actually
Yeah.
embrace life. So that's
Yeah.
also one of many tragic things in this.
It's
I also
true.
I like that the Americans aren't exactly portrayed as these angels here to save the day.
Not at all.
Like it did. I think there are kids who were killed because there are kids with guns shooting at them. And they don't.
Yeah.
And JoJo's nearly one of that, and you really don't doubt that that could have happened.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I love that it shows the just the senselessness of war, I guess is the best
Right.
word. I was gonna say like the parody of it, but
Hmm.
it is grandiose, but
Yeah.
and like kind of crazy. Like I which I assume is how it felt at the time, like just well, and also in the show they show like towards the end the final battle scene is like Rebel Wilson's character just
Mm.
handing any kid she can get her hands on like a gun or a grenade,
Right.
and
Right.
all these crazy like things and images, just saying like go die for Germany basically.
Yeah.
I think that hopefully people see that and like see the senselessness of war, especially like towards the end.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's I can't remember if he finds out that Hitler's already killed himself in the movie.
He does find out in
Yeah.
the end, and it's actually good timing because it's like pre-battle, like everything going on.
Right.
So it really drenches everything in this sense of hopelessness, and that the worldview kind of shifts, and then there's a war that feels like so scary and so large, and they've like the town is absolutely destroyed after it. It shows it's for nothing basically.
I really like that because you do have the adults talking, about like this. We're not going to win, and
Yeah.
there's obviously even at that point all that destruction was avoidable. Could have formally surrendered rather than cities be bombed,
Right.
and take your own life.
There's a great moment towards the end with Jojo's little friend, his best friend, that
Yeah.
who does become a soldier because he doesn't get like blown up in the camp or whatever, like poor Jojo,
Right.
quote unquote. But he's saying there's not, or we don't have to worry about Jews anymore, like Jojo. There's bigger things to worry about. He says like the Russians are out there and they're worse than the Jewish people. So
Right.
it just shows that it doesn't follow a through line at all. Like there's just no
Right.
rhyme or reason towards the end. And I think that's he says a really good line is, "It's not a great time to be a Nazi right now," and it really wasn't, because they're, it shows everything crumbling around them.
I loved it. I loved that his friend came back in that scene. I forgot
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Is kind of living everything Jojo thought he wanted, and it's absolutely horrible.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think we've done this one thoroughly. Megan, any
I think
closing
so.
thoughts for this before we move on
I
to our recommendations?
I think if you have any reservations about this movie, you know, don't is the best is the best I could do, because I
Yeah,
heard the chatter about it, but don't have a limiting belief about it. I really really commend Taika Waititi's like portrayal in all of this, and
right.
I think the tone of it is so well done. Personally,
Mhm.
I'll say, like, when I saw this film, I thought, if I make films, this is the kind of film that I want to make. Like, I want it
Right.
this heartfelt and this, I wouldn't even say it's controversial. Like, I think it just is topical and just really well done. So, which I know is hard to do. I think that comedy is extremely hard to do, and I think
Mhm.
that like parody is even more extremely hard to do. But this film really triumphs it, and like I think it kind of triumphs like trying it as well. People were really, I felt like the attitude was very, you can't touch Nazism in terms of comedy, or I had heard that before
Right.
this
Right.
film, and I just clearly like, you certainly can. And it's not that, you know, the atrocities aren't funny, but like the stupidity of Nazism is very funny. So
Right.
I'm really glad that it got talked about, and especially through the voice of Taika Waititi. So that was my take on the film as a whole.
Fully agree with you, Megan. I think the best thing to do for Nazi is to point and laugh. So,
Yep.
or beat them. Who cares? But I
Yeah.
think this, like you said, this movie was controversial for the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
or rather the wrong perceived reasons. I think if you have any qualms, I think just watch it for yourself. But I don't think this movie has anything to apologize for personally. All right. Well, I think we're both going to recommend a Taika project, right? You want to start,
I
Megan?
will, yes. I
Okay,
I was gonna say, like, I didn't at first have a movie in mind, because I had
that's okay.
honestly not seen a movie that reminded me like this.
Sure.
And so to our listeners, like, please give me a movie that you feel like reminds me of this. Because when I saw it, I thought, how refreshing! Like, I want more of this. So if there
Hmm.
is any out there, I'm sure there is, and I just don't know about it. So
You know,
I
if I can
yeah, go
interject real
ahead.
quick, Megan, like, it's not a parody, but a movie that does something similar. One specific thing similar is Marie Antoinette, which I really
Ooh.
liked
Oh yeah, yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
that movie has a lot of modern music. It has like punk music and 80s music in it.
Yeah.
And also it just feels a lot more alive as a period piece. So that was a very surprising thing to me. And I think this movie also accomplishes
Oh.
that with the David Bowie and the Beatles. Like not necessarily
Yeah.
current contemporary music, but certainly not music from the time, music that didn't
Mm-hmm.
exist yet, makes it feel fresher in a grounded way. So
Yes.
the only handful of movies I think of that pull that off really well. But that really
Ooh.
stuck with me, and I haven't really sat out or enjoyed other Sophia Coppola movies, but I really liked Marie Antoinette.
That's a great reminder, because
Yeah,
I know about it, seen clips and everything. I've seen it talked about more in like its aesthetic
sure.
than anything else. So
Yeah,
I would be happy to rewatch that, definitely. Or actually, I feel like I've seen it, but it may have been
yeah,
quite a long time ago.
yeah. But it's certainly not parody, and I think you're
Yeah,
absolutely right that parody is even harder to do than a standard comedy. I think if you just think about how many great parodies there are out there, listeners, there's not that
that's
many. There's
true.
a lot of bad parodies.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
good parodies have
My
bad sequels. You know.
my SNL days are holding off out like on thin. I think they're
Yeah,
I was a big SNL fan, but it's like
sure.
that was where I would go for my parody with
Right.
my family and stuff. But it's time to get more like Taika Waititi's out there to make those
Absolutely.
full length films. But as we talked about, Taika is doing really strong in
Mhm.
television. I'm excited about that new film that you talked about, hopefully coming out. I hadn't heard anything about that, so that's really exciting. But the pick that I will go for a recommendation of his is one that I just got into called Reservation Dogs. It's available on Hulu. and this is about a Native American reservation in Oklahoma, and the kids are like 14, they're young teenagers, I would say 13 to 14-ish, just about their life on the reservation and their aspirations to go elsewhere. So this is an American reservation, going over like American and Native relations in the movie, and it's very, very interesting, very poignant. I feel like something quickly that I want to say too, that I feel like he also treats, I've seen this before, that he treats children very
Mhm.
highly in his like in his work and in his creative practice. And they are taken very seriously in this film, but they're, they're just kids like on a reservation set in modern day. And it's very funny and very endearing. I think his tone with the way he talks about like a child's experience or a teenager's experience is very sincere, and it comes
Yeah,
through a lot in this show, the best. So I really recommend it.
it's a great show. I need to catch up on it. And I fully agree with your
I know
assessment.
it.
He handles, I think he also really understands poverty in a
Yeah.
way of someone who's experienced. We should know the co-creator for Reservation Dogs, Sterling Harjo, I believe I'm saying correct, but
Hmm.
is a Native American who was raised on a reservation in Oklahoma. So
Yes.
this is, I'm not sure how autobiographical, but it's certainly a scenario he's familiar with. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
well, going back to Taika, my pick is going to be Hunt for the Wilder People, a
Hmm.
movie he did in 2016. This is actually the movie he did right before Thor Ragnarok, and it stars. He does have a cameo in it, but Sam Neill is the star, and Julian Dennison, who not in a ton of other things, but he was in Deadpool 2. He's the kid in that. But
Oh,
it's
okay.
yeah, okay, good. You know what I'm talking about. But this
Mm.
kid is Ricky Baker. He's a foster kid who's been kicked out of several homes. He's considered the trouble kid. He's 14 and is adopted by an older couple who never had kids. And Samuel's the husband here, who live kind of out middle of nowhere. Samuel's very much just wants to farm and go hunting in the woods. Is actually illiterate, but
Mm.
kind of standoffish. And this is a spoiler, but it's important. The mother dies very unexpectedly,
Mm.
and other strange circumstances happen that basically result in Sam Neill and this kid are just kind of on the run in the woods in New Zealand. People think they committed a crime they didn't, and it just becomes a kind of buddy travel comedy where they
Hmm.
do, of course, form more of a father-son bond. It's very funny. It's very sweet. It's a great movie, all shot in New Zealand. I really loved it, and it's another one of those like teenage movies that got to me, in a much
Oh,
more
very
rounded
nice.
way than usual. But it's a very fun and sweet watch. So,
Hmm.
recommend checking that out. Hunt for the Wilder People.
Love it. I feel like Taika really has that like that sweetness factor that is honestly
Yeah,
like very hard to do. It's hard
absolutely.
to do, not like in a contrived way or something like that. And
Hmm.
I'm just really impressed with his tone overall and
Yeah,
really excited to see more from him.
I, you make me think about this because this is odd comment, but like a movie that I think we both didn't care for is
Mm.
Marriage Story.
Yeah, we talked
Yeah,
about
and
that.
I don't know if we talk about this on the podcast, but I bring this up because I think that's just what it is. Like, I just don't agree with the way that movie portrays people. You know,
I That
um,
is a great way to say that.
yeah, and there's other filmmakers who I really really love who will occasionally say something about people that I don't fully agree with, but I understand the
Hmm.
scenario. And I think that movie just seemed to lack empathy for me because it kind of seemed to treat this as just a thing two adults that happened to two adults, not two adults making a bad decision when there's a kid involved.
I
um,
agree.
and yeah, again, not exactly a related movie, except I just been realizing the movies that I do truly love and the filmmakers really
Hmm.
connect with. I not just think understand human emotions, but also I agree with their interpretation on it, which is not necessarily the same thing,
Right.
but
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
pretty close. And I think Taika Waititi's movies make me remember being 12 and 14
Yes.
and other scenarios that I don't think about often. I think, yes, that is actually what that was like. um,
Wow.
Much
Oh,
more than a lot of other major filmmakers.
I mean, I really agree with you. I think like portraying humanity
Mm,
in a relatable way and in a I don't know, just like a bit of a reverent way is what I grab onto as well. And
Great.
especially the way he's done it so far.
There's a quote from Bong Joon-ho, the Parasite and many other great
Hmm.
films filmmaker, said that your ability as a screenwriter is directly correlated to your understanding of the human experience. And
I think I've
yeah,
heard that quote.
and
Yes.
it's very accurate. And
Yeah.
that's not always necessarily Igmar Bergman, deeply philosophical and fine. Sometimes that's just a 12-year-old confused kid.
Yes. Exactly.
It's all part of it. Well, folks, thank you for sticking out.
Hmm.
I know this was maybe one of our most overtly political episodes in a while, so
Hmm.
thanks for bearing with it. That's probably not going to change. We're going to have a couple guests on soon to talk about a very famous American filmmaker. I think we'll leave that tease.
Beautiful.
One of the most
Hmm.
prolific. So be on the lookout for that.